You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 246. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. How much time do you think you spend in a week with food? Thinking about food, preparing food, eating food, cleaning up after a meal? Chances are there's a pretty big chunk of your life that is spent nourishing your body, whether you are doing it intentionally or not. And this week's podcast episode is all about how you can use meal planning as a time management strategy. And I'm really excited to share this episode with you today. Really excited because it brings together my love of meal planning and food. It's a passion of mine. It also brings together time management and efficiency. And it also brings together the idea of you living a more holistic life, right? Where you're approaching your career and your health, right? Your life in a way where things are integrated. They all fit together. And you might ask yourself, well, Paula, how is it relevant? How is meal planning relevant to me as a lawyer in practice? Well, if you're saving time, if you're increasing your energy, if you have better focus because you're meal planning, then all of that gives you more time, more energy, more capacity to do your work really well and also enjoy other aspects of your life. So this is a really great episode for you if you're thinking about how to improve your time management systems, if you're thinking about how to plan your meals more effectively. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you join me here this week. So where this all began is, as you probably know, I'm pretty keen on time management, and I've heard so many time management tips and tricks and strategies, and I focus on lawyers. So I'm always thinking about it in the context of a law firm or professional environment where lawyers will work, whether that's in government or in-house. And what's so interesting is that rarely is food on the list, right? Usually it's about scheduling and planning, and we're thinking about projects, etc. But food rarely makes it. And yet, as human beings, right? And at the moment, I'm pretty sure that all of us are human beings that need to eat. It is a part of our day, right? And I think for so many of us, for busy professionals in general, there's this feeling of our work is really important, our days are really busy, and we're putting other people's needs first. And what that can sometimes lead to is this dismissing of our basic nutritional needs. And yet we're human, we need to eat. So instead of denying it or leaving it to the last minute, what planning your meals does is it actually gets you ahead of the game. And it's a great skill to develop, right? We talk about building a practice that's proactive versus reactive, and we're just doing this with food. So yes, today we're talking about food, but you might also think about how these skills apply in other areas of your life, right? We're going from reactive to proactive. And here's what we're going to pitch to you in terms of why meal planning is something that you should jump on board with. I think it will save you time. It can help you increase your focus and decrease distraction, and you can use it to increase your energy. And I get it. Depending on where you're at in your life, meal planning may play a different role. So if I look at 28-year-old Paula, she was single. She was working downtown at a law firm. She was billing quite a number of hours at her firm, and she wasn't really thinking about meal planning, certainly not in the way I do now. She was going out to restaurants most nights or ordering takeout. She would buy whatever from a local, sandwich shop at lunches. She went to Starbucks every morning for an Americano. She wasn't doing much meal prep at home. In fact, preparing for today, it reminded me of a kiwi fruit that I had bought at some point in my, late 20s, early 30s. And I just remember it because I bought fruit, which was, I guess, at the time out of the ordinary. And it sat on this dish, sort of this pretty fruit display dish, for such a long time that the kiwi fruit actually started to get fat. I don't know what was happening inside of that fruit. And eventually it started to like leak kiwi juice. It was so weird. That was 28-year-old Paula. And that is a far cry from 38-year-old Paula, who had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. She had just gone back to work downtown at an office 4 days a week at a law firm. And she was managing the schedule for herself, for her 1 and 3-year-old. Paula's husband was kind of traveling, much like he does today. So Monday to Thursday, I'm the designated kind of food person most of the time. And I was planning lunches for my 2 kids who were one at daycare, one with a nanny. And I was planning my own food. I was planning meals, etc. And so that version of Paula is also different from today's version, 48-year-old Paula, who has an 11 and a 13-year-old. And I'm still meal planning, but a lot lighter on school lunches and maybe a bit more interesting and engaged for dinner meals. And now I work from home. I'm not in an office, so I have the luxury of doing the things that you can do when you work from home. You'll hear more about that in this episode. But for you, I would encourage you to think about the stage of life that you're at and how that is going to impact your planning of meals. And whether you are on your own, right? You don't have dependents and you might think, well, I don't really need to meal plan. Of course, your meal planning is going to look very different from you if you are, say, more like me. You're at some stage of life where you've got maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or I don't know how many children at home. Maybe you've got a partner who is helping, but you're in charge. Maybe not. Maybe your partner takes care of this. So you're focused more on your own planning. But wherever you're at, I promise you that what we talk about today is going to be relevant. And so what I'm going to do is break it down. I'm going to try to make 3 main points. Now, I can already tell I'm getting really excited by the topic, and I knew in preparing that I'd have to really rein myself in. So I'm going to do my best to keep it down to 3 main points and 3 main actionable takeaways. I want this to be an episode where you walk away and you're like, yes, that was helpful. I can do these 3 things and I'm going to probably eat better. And I'm also going to save time and hopefully have improved focus. So are you ready? I'm ready. We're going to start by defining what meal planning means. And for today, we're going to look at it from really 3 perspectives. One is weekly planning. So to me, that's looking at your week ahead and planning roughly the meals that you're going to consume over the course of the week. We're going to talk about daily scheduling. So that's actually when during a workday in particular you're going to eat. And then finally, we're going to look at the quality, the what of what you're actually planning. And by doing it this way, I'm trying to communicate it in a way that it's simple. You can imagine over the past 13 years, I've really honed in my systems. And if I were to try to explain all of it, I would probably lose you. I would still be excited, but you wouldn't. And so I don't want to do that. I want to keep you on board with me. And I want to share it in a way that it's relatable to you. And sort of that initial, if you're at the starting point, just getting started out, if you're already doing this, hopefully it helps you refine some of what you're already doing and make it even more effective for you. So we're going to start with weekly planning. Now, if you're not weekly planning, then chances are you're missing out on opportunities to save time. Now, if you don't plan, things that can happen is you might find yourself, now if you have to cook at home, not everybody does, making multiple trips to the grocery store because you don't have the ingredients you need. And, oh, I forgot the chicken. I forgot the whatever ginger. I need to go out and get it. And you're missing out potentially on opportunities to leverage time-saving strategies. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And chances are you're also carrying that mental load, right? When you haven't made a plan for anything, including food, it might kind of circle in your brain until you make a decision and then you can let it go. So the main points, the main things that you might find when you plan in advance is that it helps in all these 3 areas. So what does that mean? Planning in advance means you're going to identify what you're going to eat. So for me, my main meal planning is around my daughter's lunches and evening meals. The breakfast is pretty straightforward. Everyone's at home, nothing fancy. For my own lunch, it's the same thing every day, and I'm very happy with that. And dinners are really the things that are going to be varied. And when I plan in advance, I can make a list of the things that I need. I will take one trip on a Sunday to usually multiple stores to get everything that I need. And you don't have to do that. Some people will delegate that out. They'll order their groceries online. I'm really fussy. I like to see what I'm buying. I like to get certain cuts of meat. I like to buy produce that I've touched. If I'm buying a carton of milk, I want to buy the milk that's got the latest expiry date, not the one that's going to go bad tomorrow, etc. So everyone has a different approach to this. My approach is I'm very hands-on. I like to do the shopping. And this means that after Sunday is done, I've got a rough sketch of what we're eating during the week. I've got all of the ingredients that I need, and I've got a plan. I can rest easy. Now, the plan is flexible. I don't stick myself to a super strict, must be this way or else, but I know that I've got what I need to get through the week. I also get to see what my week looks like. So if there's a day where I'm going out to dinner, then I'll talk to my husband about that and we'll make a plan for how he's going to take over in that role, or I'm getting takeout for the kids, or there's a day that I know is going to be busier than others. And so I'll make a really simple meal, or I'll buy a takeout chicken or whatever. So by doing it in advance, you now have taken the guesswork out. You can be more efficient with your planning and you can go into your week feeling good. Now, it also gives you an opportunity to leverage time. What do I mean by that? It can mean you're delegating. With school lunches, for example, those are huge. If you have kids in school and maybe you've got a nanny to do that for you, amazing. If you don't, if you were like me, I had some help with a nanny, but she wasn't doing that. And so who was really helpful? My husband's mother was amazing. She would make lunches that we could freeze and I would just warm them up and give them to the kids. So I'm still doing meal prep in the morning. I'm still getting those lunches ready, but a big chunk of it has been taken off my plate. And I'll still do that. My husband has stews that he can make or dishes that he can make that we either save for the week, and those go in my daughter's lunch. My son kind of takes care of himself at this stage. He's got a Mito card, and I don't know what he's feeding himself at lunch, but I don't have to worry about it. So that's all good. My daughter still needs a lunch, and so we plan that. So you can delegate, and also you can look for meals that save you time. So I love meals that are set and forget. My best friend is the oven most evenings, because if I can put something in the oven and walk away from it, that meal is basically made and it's delicious and it's very little input from me. And an analogy that comes to mind, another housework related analogy, is when you wash your clothing and you take it from the washing machine and you put it in the dryer. This actually happened to me yesterday. If you don't press the button, the dryer doesn't start. And so when you go back to get your clothes, they're wet. And if you were to try to leave in a hurry, you wouldn't be able to because the clothes would still be wet. And it's not that pressing a button takes a lot of effort. It just has to be done at a certain time. And so the oven is the same way, right? You want to throw things in the oven. And if you do that ahead of time, you can actually make a really good meal with very little effort on your part, right? You compare that to standing at the stovetop, stir frying something. That to me is too much labor a lot of the time. And so you can find ways to have time-saving hacks. Other kind of tools that we use, the rice maker. I live in a half Persian household. My husband is Persian. Rice has factored into many of our evening meals. I love it. I put the rice in the rice cooker, hit a button, and I can walk away. I don't have to be there. I like air fryers. Those are also really good for roasted veggies. I like cauliflower, probably the most. Red peppers. You see where I'm going with this. When you plan in advance, you actually can see how you can do things now that will save you time later. Now, this is, of course, very similar to planning your workday. If you're looking at a long-term project and you can spot things that you can delegate today versus leaving them to the last minute, of course, you are making your life easier, saving time, you're being more efficient. So that is a second thing that happens when you are planning at a weekly basis. And then the third way that you're saving time by that planning every week is that you get to remove the mental load. Now, I don't know about you, but I know for myself and most of the humans that I engage with that when you have an unmade decision, it just circulates in your head, right? This is the reason why the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world wear the same t-shirt every day, because it reduces decision fatigue. If you've got open-ended decisions about what you're going to eat throughout the week and you have to think about that, it's distracting. It creates a mental load. And so if you can simply identify on a list, okay, what are we going to do this week? then you can put that aside and free up your mental space to do something else. So every Sunday, I will have produced at the end of that day the list of what I intend to have as meals Monday to Thursday. Those are the days that I'm responsible for. And by meals, I'm thinking really the dinners. The other stuff I don't need to write down. It's more habit at this point. But I write it down, and that way I can kind of leave it to the side, and then I'll review it in the morning. Okay, I need to be, thinking about this at whatever time because I'm responsible for it. Again, if you're not responsible for this, you're not going to be responsible for this, but you might think about how this might apply to you. How could you have some sort of a structure in place or a plan in place so that you're not really thinking about what am I going to have for dinner? You've already decided in advance. And so you're not wasting time sort of thought looping over what we're having for dinner. And this happened to me even before I had kids, right? I can remember back in my 28-year-old days, right? Maybe a bit later, but I'm thinking about when my husband and I were dating and, I was a bit older then. We met when I was, 31 or something. And so he would pick me up from work and we'd be in his car. I'd be like, so what do you want for dinner? I'd be like, I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Well, I don't know. We could have Chinese, we could have Indian, we could have Thai, blah, blah, blah. And so we'd kind of spend a bit of time thinking about it. Now, that's not a bad thing, right? We had the time, but maybe you can make those decisions in advance and save a bit of time. So anyhow, I would love for you to have an actionable takeaway here. And not surprisingly, that actionable takeaway is going to be a challenge. If you don't do this already, to give yourself time on a Sunday to look at your week ahead and just sketch out roughly what your meals are going to be. So if you eat breakfast, what that's going to look like, lunch and dinner. So that way, and maybe snacks too, right? That way you just have a forecast ahead. You can do shopping, right? If you're like me and you've got multiple people or you're shopping for yourself and you want to make sure you're well stocked with all the healthy foods that you want to eat, then you can go and you can purchase those foods. And so you feel ready, right? By the end of Sunday night, you feel ready. You've got everything you need for the week that you've planned ahead. So that was step 1. Is that weekly planning. Now, step 2 is we want to look at your workday and we want to schedule your meals in a way that is efficient. Now, if you are a snacker, if you are one of those people who doesn't take a lunch break, you simply sit at your desk and snack during the day, I want to challenge you on that. I want to invite you to think about how much time you're actually spending on food, snacking, or whatever, whether you're actually saving time. And maybe the answer for you is yes. But my guess is that if you're not scheduling discrete times to eat during a day, you are potentially losing time and also missing out on opportunities to add structure to your day. So what I'm going to offer to you is when you structure your day, when you structure the meals in your workday, you gain benefits. Now, the first benefit is the structure of having anchors in your day. So imagine your workday. What I'd love for you to think about is when you're having meals. So for example, when you're eating breakfast, when you're having lunch, when you're having snacks, and when you're having dinner, right? These are pretty typical things that people eat. You might have a different schedule. That's fine. Just think about the timing of it. And the reason that I want you to think about that, and then if you can assign times to it, and we'll get to that in a minute, that's actually going to be your challenge, spoiler alert. When you have actual times, what that does is it creates anchors in your day. So if you've ever heard me talk about scheduling a day, then you'll know that anchors are the very starting point. Anchors in your day are the things that happen every day, no matter what. When you show up at the office, that's an anchor. When you leave the office, that's an anchor. When you eat lunch, a thing that happens in the middle of the day, that is an anchor. So if you have a structured eating schedule, you have lunch midday, you have a snack in the afternoon, you've already built in 2 anchors. And what that leaves you with are blocks, time blocks. And you've probably heard of time blocking as a really efficient time management strategy. It is, because you're chunking time into pieces and you're no longer looking at this vast expanse of unattributed time. You've now got chunks, and you can use those chunks for things like focus time or email time or meeting time. So you've got these chunks that you can now use. Now, the other thing I love about breaking up your day into anchors is that it's motivating. For me, I schedule lunch midday. It's usually at noon. I'll push it back later if I'm on a phone call or if I'm really focused on a task. If I'm doing really well and I'm in it and I can, I'll push my lunch back until I finish that task. So for me, it's actually really motivating. If you are a procrastinator and you find that it's really hard for you to get motivated, if you've got a task to do and you know that, let's say it's 11 o'clock and you know that you're taking lunch at noon, or maybe it's 11:30 and you know you're taking lunch at noon, a shorter window sometimes is easier to get motivated for, then you can motivate yourself to do that task and the reward gets to be your lunch. So when you have these time blocks, you've now got some structure in your day. Now, the other thing that it does is that it reduces that distraction time. If you think about if you don't have windows in your time, right? Let's say you don't have discrete anchors, you don't have times that you're going to eat, then it's kind of an open-ended question. When am I going to snack? What am I going to eat? So if you're sitting at your computer and you're like, I'm kind of feeling a little bit snacky, then you might get up and start looking around, well, what's in the snack room? Or, did I pack that banana or not? And then you sit back down to work and then, you find you're getting hungry again. Oh, well, maybe I should eat, maybe not. Like, oh, what is there? So there's a lot of kind of distraction that goes on there. You don't really know when you're going to eat. You don't really know what you're going to eat. And so you might find that you're actually losing a lot of mental space instead of actually sitting down and doing your work. And then finally, if you're doing that, like if you think about how in the day you are snacking multiple times, you don't have a set schedule, you might find that you are actually doing this, let's say 8 times in a day, right? If you counted the number of times that you got up to look for a snack or have a snack or you're distracted by whatever, maybe it's 8 times versus if you were scheduling, say, 3 blocks where you're having snacks and a meal, maybe 2 snacks, 1 meal, or a coffee, a meal and a snack, then you can see how there's more transition times, right? There's more times where you're getting in and out of a task. And sometimes that's helpful, right? I will often drink tea or hot water throughout the day. And I like using the trip to the kettle as a break from a task, and then I go back to the next task. So it can be helpful. But if it's unconscious and it's not helpful and you're losing time, then you're not being as efficient as you think you are, right? So you might think of that false productivity of, I'm sitting at my desk, I'm eating my lunch, this is so productive, I'm not taking that hour. But maybe what you're actually doing is taking more than an hour in the transition times and sort of the lack of efficiency that you could build in by planning actual structures. So you can see where I'm going with this. If you start to actually build in that scaffolding, lunch is from whatever, like 12 to 12:30 or 12 to 1. For me, I like to take an hour for my lunch. I have the luxury of working from home. I can cook myself a quick meal. I have my go-tos. That to me is a good break. If I have enough time, I'll walk around the block and get some oxygen. And if calls go longer and I have less time, then I adapt. And I don't love it, but I'll do it. Or if I'm on a really tight timeline, then maybe I'll skip it. Or if I go out to meet a friend for lunch or whatever. So it will be flexible. For me, I like to schedule my snack time at 3:30 in the afternoon. Now that varies and it has varied over the years because of my children and their schedule. So right now, both of my kids are coming home between around 3:10 and 3:15. And so if I go down at around 3:30, I get to visit with them. And by go down, I mean, I work upstairs in my house. I go down to the kitchen and I engage with them. I have a snack. I get to maybe give them a snack. So that makes sense to me. And so what that does is I know at, 2 o'clock, if I'm feeling a little bit peckish, I can, hold out until 3:30 until snack time or whatever that looks like. So for you, you might think about what are the anchors that would make sense for you. And yes, that is your challenge. Have I said that yet? I'm saying it now. Your challenge when it comes to planning your workday, right? Using the scheduling of when you eat to support yourself at work. Your challenge is to set those times in your day and they are going to serve as anchors for you. So I mentioned that for me, my sort of typical day involves a lunch at around noon, around midday. It involves a snack, usually around 3:30 these days. I also have coffee in the morning. I'm not really a breakfast person, but I'll have coffee with my daughter if she's here. Sometimes she goes to sports early in the morning. My son, he sort of roams around, but he doesn't eat breakfast, and that's fine. And then I have a meal in the evening, dinner, right? And so depending on what my kids are doing that night, if I'm taking them out somewhere to an activity, or depending on the meal that I'm preparing, am I putting something in the oven at 4 or 5? I've got the luxury of doing that, but that will kind of dictate when my workday ends. And sometimes I put stuff down into the oven and then I go back to work. Or if it's a day that it's not an oven meal, I might work longer, but then I go downstairs and stand by the stovetop, slaving away, stir frying, whatever that looks like. So you're getting the picture. The real takeaway here is time blocks. So your goal, when are you going to eat during a workday? When are you going to schedule those times? And how do you want to use the blocks of time that emerge from that scaffolding? And that is the conversation for another podcast, how you fill those time blocks that you create with your anchors. But you can see how timing your food can actually be really effective from a time management standpoint. So that brings us to the third strategy, and that is focusing on the quality of the food that you are consuming. Now, not surprisingly, the foods that you eat will either help you feel energized or much less energized. And so you will know what foods feel good to you, which foods energize you, and which foods may serve a purpose in the short run, but in the long run don't really feel good or don't create that sustainable energy that you need to really thrive, right? So if you think about a workday where you're fueling yourself on whatever, coffee, maybe, I don't know, the leftover donuts in the servery, maybe there's some sandwiches that were left over from a meeting, maybe you're desperate and you go out and the only thing that's open is, I don't know, some weird takeout that you've never had before and it doesn't agree with you. I mean, when you're doing it in a reactive way, you're kind of taking what you can get. I'm sure you've had that experience where you're so busy, you're not really eating any proper meals, and there's like candy bowls outside of your office, and so you go and you're eating the candy. It's fine, but it's not really going to energize you the same way that a proper meal is going to energize you. Now, I can tell you that 28-year-old Paula was a lot, I don't know, she was more robust or something. Like she could handle a lot more of the foods that 48-year-old Paula just can't handle. I think of some of the takeout foods I used to love. I couldn't eat that today and feel good. I think about how much coffee I drank. I can't do that anymore. I think about spicy foods. I think about processed foods. I think about a lot of things that I used to consume. And maybe I just didn't notice how I felt, but at 48, I can tell you it shows up right away. It usually in my skin, usually my face will tell me immediately. It'll get puffy, I'll get weird red spots, and it is a very loud and hard to ignore signal that this food does not sit well in my body. And therefore, what that means is that what you can think about, what I like to think about is what are foods that are going to be energizing and sustainable versus those quick fixes that are really just going to leave me feeling depleted and actually hungry, right? I find, not surprisingly, sugar is one of the things that I find I try to avoid. It doesn't particularly do much for me health-wise. I find it makes me more hungry in the long run. The more sugar I eat, the more sugar I want to eat, which is distracting mentally for me. And it just doesn't really feel sustainable for me versus if I eat a diet that's higher in protein and, vegetables and all the whole foods that people say you should eat, I actually feel better. I feel more balanced and my days are more productive. So that's me. And I'm guessing for you that the quality of foods that you choose to eat are going to impact your energy levels. And you can imagine when you sit down to work, if you are not thinking about food because you're not hungry and you're energized, you're able to be more productive because it's just not a distraction anymore. And you've got the energy you need to do the work that you want to do. And we could go down a rabbit hole. I am really interested in nutrition. I'm fascinated by the link between what you eat and what it does to your body. So foods that support your brain health, foods that support your digestion, like all of it. And I'm fascinated by it. I am kind of like almost a savant based on what I've learned. I've even taken a course, it was years ago, about brain health coaching. And there was a whole section about foods to eat to support brain health. So you can look it up online. And again, this is one of those rabbit holes I need to not go down, because I will go down. But you know that you can fuel your body in ways that's going to really produce high quality energy and increase productivity. Very different from if you're eating foods that are going to take away from that. And if you have young kids at home, or you've ever had young kids at home, you know the difference between what happens when they eat all the sugar, right? What happens then versus when they actually eat real food that is better and more sustainable energy. And you're a human just like they are. Hopefully, as grown-ups, we have more evolved brains, but, the basic physiology is probably not that far apart. So what does that mean? What is the challenge that I'm going to offer you here now? And I think it goes without saying that if you're planning in advance, you can have those healthy foods ready to hand. You can have them available so that in the moment you're reaching for something sustainable as opposed to something that's a quick fix. And so your challenge here is to identify 5 energizing foods that you can put on your staple list, on your go-to list, that you can have relatively handy, particularly during the workday, but also outside of the workday. And I'm also going to ask you to identify 3 foods that you should probably avoid. Now, by avoid, I don't mean exclude altogether, but minimize or avoid when you can, right? So for me, I made a list of my top 5 or 5 foods that are go-to foods for me. It changes depending on the season, on, where I'm at in life. So currently, 5 foods that I picked. One is kale. And I start with kale because it's actually been a staple for years now. And I love it because I love leafy greens. I love salads. I love stir-frying kale. I love putting kale in omelets. I used to really love that salad green mix that you'd buy, and it came in a container, like a clear plastic container. But that type of salad started to really irritate me because half the time it would be like soggy and disgusting when I would buy it. And so I kind of gave up on that. I went to spinach for a while, but then I found it was too chalky. And I actually tried arugula for a while, but I found it was too bitter to consume. So kale has become my go-to. And one of the things I love about kale is that it's extremely durable. When you buy kale at the grocery store, you can actually physically look at it and touch it and make sure that it's like good kale. It's going to last more than a day. It lasts really well in the fridge. It's versatile. So kale is on my list. And I realize that so many people use kale as like a punchline to a joke of whatever, but it's good and I like it. And it's one of my staples. High protein milk is a new one for me. I have also experimented with Greek yogurt and cottage cheese. Those are also kind of the dairy, high protein foods. They don't agree with me as much. And so the high protein milk, actually, I'm quite a big fan of. I put it in my coffee. I use it in smoothies. That is a great way to get some easy protein. Egg whites, again, super simple. Frozen berries. So if you look in our freezer at the moment, we have got like the world supply of frozen berries, right? The things you'd expect: strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. But we also have cherries, pineapples, mangoes, pomegranate seeds right now. So there's a ton of really amazing frozen fruit that you can buy at the store. I like to wait for it to go on sale and then I stock up. And I just find it's great for smoothies. It's great for snacks. So frozen fruit is amazing. It doesn't go bad, which is nice. I also buy fresh fruit, but more and more I'm also buying the frozen fruit and freezing fresh fruit. If I buy fruit that's in season. This year we had amazing pears, persimmons, guavas. One of our local grocers started selling guavas. And so I will freeze those and they're great snacks. And then finally, I like to have coffee on hand. I don't drink too much of it because it no longer agrees with me. Again, 48-year-old Paula just can't do multiple cups of coffee in a day. But green tea, if I need a bit of a boost, I like to drink it with my lunch. Those are things that I will have on hand. And then for meal planning, generally, my family eats meat. So I'll kind of have, my weekly shop will involve going out and getting meats. I'm usually buying them on a Sunday. So whatever will be fresh until a Wednesday, and then Thursday, I might have to go back to the store. I don't like leaving meats in the fridge for that long. If I'm buying them fresh, there's some things I'll have frozen and on hand. Tonight, for example, or tomorrow, today's Wednesday. Tomorrow, there's the frozen fish. I'll bring that out for the Thursday. So again, you're going to be thinking about what foods are energizing for you and what do you want to have on hand. And then I said also that having the foods that you avoid is probably pretty handy too. Now, I don't consciously go out of my way to avoid these foods, but over time, I have found I've kind of phased them out, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I mentioned sugar. So I do avoid, for the most part, like sugar on a day-to-day. I will have dessert sometimes if it's offered and I feel like it, but I'm not seeking out sweets all that much. I avoid excessive caffeine. You may have picked up on that just a minute ago when I talked about coffee. I try not to over-caffeinate because I get kind of jittery and anxious. I generally avoid highly processed foods. So again, 28-year-old Paula, she loved Cheetos and Doritos, and especially that like multi-mix where they have like, I don't know, I don't like the pretzel part of it, but the cheesies and the Doritos and the Sun Chips, like those things, I just can't eat them anymore. It just doesn't work for me. And then finally, I'm not big on alcohol. And I think I've mentioned that on the podcast before. And it's not that I'm anti-alcohol. It just, again, it doesn't really agree with me. It's hard for me to digest. I feel really sluggish the next day. And so I'm not like actively crusading against it. I'm also not seeking it out. It's kind of like sugar. I'll have it once in a while, but I'm not like married to it. So for you, you might just think about what would you have on that list? And, that might be the sugary foods. It might be the processed foods. It might be just a certain type of food that makes your stomach feel upset. And it's just kind of having it as a conscious, semi-conscious thing so that, if you find yourself reaching for the sweets at the office when it's not going to feel good, maybe it's creating just an extra level of awareness. You'll be like, what I really need is like an actual proper meal. And then you can go in and do that. And, sometimes it's helpful to save part of your lunch for an afternoon snack, right? If you go out to eat at the office and maybe you've got some extra chicken and whatever came with that, and you don't finish it, maybe that becomes your snack for the afternoon. Again, more nourishing and likely to generate more sustainable energy than the Timbits that have been sitting on the servery counter for the last 3 days, which, funnily enough, didn't look all that appetizing when you weren't starving, but they become appetizing, right? So we're at the end here in terms of what I wanted to share with you today. To summarize your actionable takeaways, and hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you're feeling like, yeah, no, I get this. And yeah, no, these are things that I do already, but I'm thinking about how I might do them in a different way. Or maybe you don't do these things and you're considering, well, if I started to do that, here's what it could look like. And maybe you're starting to see how it could potentially save you time. You might be seeing ways that maybe you're not maximizing your time, you're losing opportunities to be efficient. So here we are going to, number one, plan our weeks out in advance. So Sunday, ideally, if you're looking at your work week, what's happening this week and, what's your meal plan? What are you going to eat? What shopping do you need to do? What can you delegate? When are you going to have your cheat day, which isn't necessarily, the day that I eat all the pizza, but maybe it's the day that you get takeout instead of making a meal. Creating regular eating windows and structure in your day. So that's step 2. What's the scaffolding you want to give yourself? And really, you're using your meals as a tool to put structure into your day, to create those time blocks, to have sustainable energy so that your days are more efficient at the office. And then 3, what's your short list? What are your top 5? What are your bottom 3? And that just gives you a bit of guidance. And then, have those foods on hand, right? Those ones that you really like, and maybe make it a bit more difficult for you to get access to the foods that aren't as sustaining. Now, there are some actual meta benefits here. If you're doing this with your food, you're actually going to be learning a whole bunch of skills that apply across the board. When I think about planning in my business, or if I'm helping a lawyer plan their practice and their workday, so many of these skills are relevant and applicable. So you're really practicing a skill set that is useful across the board. You're also developing a sense of accountability with yourself and sort of showing yourself how when you plan and follow through, it creates this loop of like, I can do this. I trust myself. Like, I've got this, and it builds your confidence. So it's actually kind of a cool tool. It's low stakes. It's like what you're having for dinner. This isn't going to make or break you, but that meta skill of planning and following through and executing, it's pretty cool. Like, it's, again, transferable. It also teaches you how to be flexible. So I love having the structure in place, but I also know that I'm willing to move it around, right? I'm willing to move the timing of things. I'm willing to move, what we are having on what day. And again, it's just kind of like recalibrating because things come up or you might change your mind about something. and that's fine. But now you have the flexibility, you're working with what you have versus starting from scratch. You might also find that you develop some, new recipes or food ideas, or like me, you might start going down the rabbit hole and really enjoy it. The last thing that I wanted to share here is that it still consumes time. So you may gather that at this stage of my life, meal prep for myself and for my family actually consumes a fair amount of time. So, a few hours probably every day by the time I factor in meal prep and cleanup. And that's just how it is. I'm okay with that. I expect that'll be less as my children get older and I can delegate more to them perhaps. So for you might think about how much time you're actually spending. And the goal isn't to make your meal planning and consuming no time. It's just to be really intentional about the way that you are doing it. And also, this could be fun, right? Like I mentioned, this for me is kind of like a blending of worlds that I really enjoy: the food, the planning, the efficiency. And so for you, you might be able to find some really fun aspects to it. And then finally, it's a work in progress, right? Your life is going to change. It's going to evolve. And so chances are the way that you structure and plan your meals is also going to evolve. And that's great, right? You need to build this based on your needs, based on what you like, based on what works for you, not what works for me, obviously. And so it's kind of fun, right? It becomes a bit of a game. So if you would like to go deeper on this, right? Like I like to offer a holistic approach to your life. I love working with lawyers to help them plan more strategically, whether it's career planning or your day-to-day planning. And if this is something that appeals to you, right? If you want support and help on just how you're structuring your practice day to day, maybe looking at the bigger picture of your practice, by all means, reach out to me. I would love to hear from you and we can talk about how we could work together. And if you're not necessarily looking at this as something for yourself, but you support other lawyers or you're looking for someone to come in and do some training around this, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. I'd absolutely love to hear from you and talk about what that could look like. So with that, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to wish you the best this week. I hope you try out some of these strategies and let me know how it goes. Love to hear that. And I'm excited to reconnect with you again next week. So bye for now and have a great week. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.